Student debt lowers life satisfaction. Car debt tanks life satisfaction. Credit card debt is catastrophic for life satisfaction. We've been seeing this for years and years. People who give more money away, they get richer. What happens is when you give money away, you become a problem solver and your mind changes. And the deal is that you think that with more money, you're going to be a lot better off. That's something that's really out of sync because we have these expectations about what money's going to buy with our happiness, and it doesn't. It turns out there's 5 things that you can do with your money. 4 of them will bring you happiness, and 1 won't. Your brain is telling you to do the one thing that won't bring happiness. The worst thing you can do that brings you no satisfaction and lowers your happiness is to so it's really clear. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm an economist by background, but I study, the science of happiness. And so that putting those 2 things together, one of the things that I teach my students and I talk about a lot is the ways that you can buy happiness. It turns out there's 5 things that you can do with your money. You can buy stuff, you can buy experiences, you can buy time, you can give it away, or you can save it. Those are the only things you can do with your money, right? 4 of them will bring you happiness, and 1 won't. Your brain is telling you to do the one thing that won't bring happiness, which is to go buy stuff, because we're evolved in that way. So humans were evolved. We're a kin-based, hierarchical, tropical species, Homo sapiens. Now, some of that we're going to get beyond. Like we invented coats, so we don't have to live in tropical places. I live in Boston, which is the world's worst weather. It's fine.
Agreed.
I can live in a house that has heat, etc. But I'm not going to get away from this hierarchical kind of kin-based species. And so the result is that we have this natural evolved tendency to want to rise in the hierarchy. How do you do that? By signaling. How do you signal? By actually being able to have more stuff than you need to survive. The way that you display that's the reason that people have 5 watches. Why in the heck do you need 5 watches? Because you can.
It's a flex.
And if you can, what that suggests to potential mates, for example, and to people who might want to understand if you're the alpha or the beta in your tribe, is they look at all your stuff and say, George has got more watches than he needs. Clearly, he should be able to have 75 children. This is kind of what your brain is doing. Now, of course, that's anachronistic. You don't know that you're doing that.
But it's about status and success.
It's about status and success, and then you try to connect it on. It must be that I really enjoy that. And then you say, if I get that better car, my car's fine, but if I get that better car, I'm going to really enjoy it a lot, and it's going to make me happier. And then it doesn't. You're like, I guess I needed a better car. Now, once you know that, you're going to notice it, and you have a fighting chance of changing your behavior.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the whole point. Now, the other 4 actually do authentically bring happiness, but those aren't our tendency. Buying experiences with people you love. That's really important. Now, experiences, they cost money, depending. I mean, you can walk in the park with your beloved, and it might be free, except time. But if you want to go to Cancun, it's going to cost you some dough, right? But if you're going to spend the money, do that and do it with somebody you truly love, because then you'll remember it forever. We think that stuff is permanent and experiences are evanescent. They're impermanent. It's exactly the opposite. You'll forget the stuff and you won't forget the experiences. I learned this, by the way, in a very real way. I'm a social scientist, but I'm living in a laboratory environment called my life because I study behavior.
The best experiment.
Yeah. And, I've been married 33 years. 32 years ago, my wife and I were having this knockdown, drag-out fight, ironically, about how to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. And the reason was because we had no money. We had just immigrated to the United States from Spain, and my wife didn't speak English yet, and I was working this very basic job. I was in school, in my late 20s, but I was in college, just trying to, get my life together. And we had just enough money to borrow or beg or whatever to do one of 2 things. We could go to the beach for 3 days to celebrate our anniversary, or we could use the same money to buy a couch. And we didn't have a couch. And so my wife, who's Spanish, she's all about the beach. And I'm a thrifty, practical American. So I'm like, the couch, we'll have it forever.
So you're thinking utility, she's thinking fun.
The beach is over in 3 days, man. The couch is forever. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So we're going back and forth. Beach, couch, beach. Finally we compromise and we go to the beach. And that's why I've been married 33 years. But my point is that we thought about that recently, and we got the couch 6 months later, right? Because we had the money and got the couch. I don't remember the couch. I don't remember what color it was. Gray, blue. But I remember that beach vacation, everything that we did, because we were in love, and we still are. Experiences with the people that you love are truly permanent. And I could explain the neuroscience of how you store those and reconstruct those memories over and into a series of folders in your brain, actually, and you reconstruct the memories. And every time you do that, it frames up the current context of your life. The couch, nothing. Who cares? It's a couch. But the beach vacation with your beloved? No joke. That's number one. Number two is you buy time and spend it wisely. For example, if you don't like cutting your lawn and you've got a little extra cash, spread the love and hire somebody to cut your lawn. You just created a job. A lot of Americans are very snooty about that, where they're kind of, oh, that's classist. That's an elitist thing to
hire someone.
Yeah, but that's nuts.
Yeah.
It's the best thing you can do if you've got extra money to hire somebody to clean your house. And by the way, pay them fairly and pay them a fair wage and do it honestly and do it legally. Super important. But then don't waste the time. Don't fritter it away on Instagram. That's stupid because that's just a waste of your time. Spend the time in something meaningful, reading a book that you want to read, going for a walk in the country, spending the time with the person that you love. That's the second way you're truly buying happiness and you're creating a job. Third is to give it away. Give it to something in your community, something that really speaks to you, and it'll give you joy. It's a really important thing. And one of the things that I've shown in my research, going way back, this goes back 25 years in my research, is that the more you give to charity, the richer you get. And what do you find? You find that in subsequent years, when you give $1 to charity, on average, there's about $1.60 that comes back to you in subsequent years. Now, I was thinking when I first saw this, got to be the hand of God. Nah, it doesn't make sense. I didn't believe it, actually. I thought there was something wrong with my data. And then I was working with this psychologist. I'm an economist. I was working with a psychologist. He says, no, we've been seeing this for years and years. People who give more money away, they get richer. And they make way more money back than that which they give away. And I'm like, is this, the wheels of,
This isn't like a karma thing, like you give what you get. It's not one of those. It's
what
beyond
happens
that.
is when you give money away, you become a problem solver and your mind changes. You become a more effective person. People who solve problems and give their money away are people who feel more effective and they earn more money. And I talked about the practical side. I could tell you about, how it makes people think you're better looking. I've got data on that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Women find men more attractive when they're seen to be giving and volunteering.
When they give a big tip at the end of that dinner, they go, man, that guy's good looking.
I like it. Now, of course, evolutionarily, it says
I should try this.
He's got enough money. He's got extra money.
So there's a piece that's financial. If he has the money to be a generous giver, that's attractive on its own.
But what you find also is that people who are already in couples, women find men more attractive, even if they're already in a couple. If they've been married 25 years, your wife likes you more when she sees you being charitable toward others. There's a lot of laboratory evidence that suggests that using human participants in these experiments. So that's to giving money away, but you got to find something. You got to do the work to find out what animates your soul, to figure out what you want to give to. And last but not least, so that's 1, 2, and 3 that'll buy happiness. Here's the biggie. Put your money away and save it. Every dollar you save will buy happiness for you. And the reason is because we're evolved to make progress. Human beings don't get that much satisfaction from arriving at a goal, but at making progress toward a goal. I've done a lot of research over the years on, why people are so happy when they're on a diet. And the reason is because the scale goes down, and it's well worth not eating what they like. Because the scale going down is a daily reward. We're making progress.
Is that its own drug in a sense?
It is incredibly rewarding, and it actually satisfies the dopaminergic pathways. I mean, the dopamine pathways give you an anticipation of reward, and that anticipation is really the sweetness of life. Well, the progress principle.
Yes.
That's how it works. When you're making progress in one part of your life, you start making progress in all parts of your life. Now, the better way to do it is to not be in debt in the first place and just start making progress toward a bolus of savings. Because what that says is life is going to be more secure later. I'm going to leave more for my kids. I'm going to be able to buy a house without a mortgage at some point. Or maybe. I mean, how wonderful is that kind of thing? But even if you are in debt, getting out of debt will give you the same progress principle. The worst thing that you can do with your money, the worst thing you can do that brings you no satisfaction and lowers your happiness is to spend it when you don't have it for consumption. In other words, buy something you don't have the money for that's just fun for you right now. So, for example, running up your credit card bills is the stupidest thing you can possibly do. Now, I get it. Sometimes there's like a moment of desperation, you got to put groceries on your credit card. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, I don't know, man. I can't afford this vacation to Cancun right now, but you know what? I'll pay it off over the next 6 months. Okay, if you do it with your beloved, that's good enough, I guess. Even worse than that would be, I want to buy a big screen TV and put it on my credit card and pay that off over the next 5 months. Worse is I'm going to buy an $85,000 truck.
Oh boy.
And I'm going to put it almost all on credit and I'm going to pay it off over the next 5 years, $600 a month. That is insanity because the truck enjoyment will wear off very, very quickly. And 5 years from now, it's still eating away at you and you're not making progress. You're going backwards. And if progress brings happiness, regress brings unhappiness. That's the reason that debt is a form of happiness death.
Over time.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power about your own emotions and about your own happiness. This is the reason I teach happiness, because I want people to have the knowledge. And I've found that when people understand some of the science, like I talk about the blah, 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 the science in the brain and the neuromodulators and all this stuff. But when people have a little bit of that, they're like, I understand me. So don't make the two biggest errors when it comes to money, which is thinking that consumption of stuff will bring you happiness and that borrowing is somehow okay. Those are the two big errors. And when you combine those two errors, if you're rich enough, you actually might want to keep your 2.85 mortgage, even though you can afford to pay it off and then put more money into the market. I get that if you're rich enough. The problem is if you're not, what happens is that the debt that you have, especially consumer debt, is a burden. It's a psychological burden. And when you have a psychological burden, it's like you're carrying an enormously heavy backpack and trying to run a foot race. You need to actually be free. You need to be psychologically free. And the best feeling you can possibly get, and I say this on the basis of somebody who studies behavior, and this is about happiness, not about sheer economic calculations, is not having the burden of having somebody have a piece of you. You need to be free. It's the most amazing feeling when you have, can you imagine having zero debt in your life? You owe nobody anything. I remember telling my father taught me this. He said, debt is a form of slavery. Now, there's certain cases where it is logical. You're just not going to have enough money to buy a house and you want to be a good member of your community and you want to raise and there's a very fluid market for mortgages and okay, fine. But there aren't that many other cases where and by the way, if you're paying rent, you're not making progress. And if you're paying a mortgage, at least a little tiny piece of the house is becoming yours. And so that's one of the reasons that the research shows that mortgage debt is the only kind of debt that doesn't lower happiness. It actually doesn't lower happiness unless it's too big. Unless it's become too big.
You can't afford the payment.
Yeah. Well, you can afford, even if you can't afford the payment, if it's such a big thing that you're worrying about it every month, then it's going to lower your life satisfaction quite a lot. Student debt lowers life satisfaction. Car debt tanks life satisfaction. Credit card debt is catastrophic for life satisfaction. It's one of the greatest barriers to happiness and that actually brings unhappiness, which is not the same. Happiness and unhappiness are processed largely in different hemispheres of the brain. So they're not opposites. And we have both kinds of both negative and positive emotions in response to threats and opportunities in the environment. One of the greatest stimuli for negative emotion, negative affect in our lives is aggravation. And so people will say to me sometimes, like, will I be happier if I cut my commute and move closer to my job? And the answer is no. But you will be less unhappy if you do that. Because commuting is the number one activity not involving other people that people do that brings unhappiness to their life. You want to know what the number one interaction with another person that brings unhappiness to people's lives every day is?
What's that?
Spending time with your boss. That's the number one unhappiness-provoking interaction in the average person's day, is spending time with your boss.
That is why.
And again, the secret is in the science. Once you understand what's going on between your ears, then you can manage yourself a lot better. You can change your habits. And once you change your habits, you can actually start passing on these ideas to other people. And that's the real gift, is when you become a happiness teacher. So, yeah, when people are asked to speculate on the amount of money that would be enough, because that's really what it is. It's not about happiness. It's about having enough.
To be comfortable.
Yeah,
which
to
is
be comfortable.
So
what that means is to not be bothered. That's really what it comes down to. All of those, how much would you need to be happy, are really questions about how much would you need to not be unhappy. And the sources of the unhappiness are the aggravations that come because you're worried about money or you're feeling pressure from money. That's really what it comes down to. And so people are speculating on, man, how much would I need so I'm not feeling kind of out of sorts? I'm not thinking about money all the time.
It's not living in your head rent free.
Exactly right. And what you find is we do know what that number is, but the speculative number isn't very meaningful because according to the data, it's almost 40% more than you have. And so that's a moving horizon. And the reason is because they're not watching the Ramsey show and trying to live within their means. If you live within your means, your horizon's not going to change. But if you don't live within your means, in other words, you're going to go to the hilt in what you can spend, to be comfortable is always going to be 40% out. And
which means you'll never achieve it because it's always, what's the magic salary? More.
That's no way to live. But if you're living within your means, then it's sweet. And that's really why this is so critically important. Get out of debt. Don't spend beyond your means. You will live a happier and less unhappy life. Bottom line is what it comes down to. Now, how much do people actually need if they live within their means? And the answer is less than you think. The answer is less than you think.
Even with inflation and all the rent going up.
Yeah, I mean, index it for inflation if you want. But there was a very famous study in 2005 that was actually put together by two economists at Princeton that looked at how much people needed to max out in their life satisfaction. And what they found is $75,000 a year. Now, of course, if you're in New York, San Francisco versus Nashville versus Tupelo, Mississippi. I mean, different,
it's relative.
It really is relative. But the whole point is it's less than you think. Why? Because you get above that threshold of avoidable unhappiness problems where your kids are getting fed, you're able to make the rent, you're able to go to the doctor, you're able to do all this stuff, and that stuff's not bothering you anymore. And anything above that is not really going to wipe out that much more unhappiness if you're living within your means. Now, maybe it's 250, maybe it's 400, and there's new research out there from a guy at Penn named Matt Killingsworth, who's a great researcher who says that it's actually a higher number. Here's the really interesting thing about it. It does get flat at a relatively low pace. People evaluate their lives as much better with more money, but don't feel it. So this is a funny thing.
So on paper, they go, I'm happier.
They say, I should be happier, but I'm not. So this is a weird thing where I evaluate my life and I'm like, that's a lot of money. Yeah, my life is really, really good, but I feel crummy. What's the deal? And the deal is that you think that with more money, you're going to be a lot better off. And so when you find that you're actually pretty prosperous, you judge your life as being really good, but your mood balance and your level of anxiety don't match that. That's something that's really out of sync because we have those expectations about what money's going to buy with our happiness, and it doesn't. Unless
so we think my life will be perfect, and then it's still
my life should be perfect. My life should be perfect, but it isn't perfect. And that's a cognitive dissonance that people are struggling with an awful lot. When you can understand the science that we're talking about here, you can marry these things up and be at peace. And that's one of the great secrets. It's what you invest in your life. And again, it's a metaphor for what we actually do with our budget. If you invest intelligently and early on more growth stocks and later on more bonds and having more in cash and such that when you're older, you're stable and secure and not worried, that's great. But the same thing is true with the investments that you make in your life. And there's 4 investments you need to be thinking about over the course of your life: your faith, your family, your friendship, and your work that serves other people. That's what it comes down to. And what that really, really comes down to, the bottom line on that, maybe the best last word, is that when I talk about those things, I'm talking about love of the divine, and love of your family, and love of your friends, and the love that you express to the whole world, whether you enjoy it every single second or not, through the way you earn your daily bread. It's love, 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 and more love. Your investments are love investments. And if you do that, you're going to be on the upper trajectory for the rest of your life.